Welcome to The Feast Life, where we empower you, the modern homeschool mom, to create a life and homeschool you love. One founded on faith, family, freedom, and fun. I'm your host, Julie Ross, creator of the award-winning homeschool curriculum, A Gentle Feast, and a certified Christian life coach. For more information on today's episode and to access my free gift for you, check out thefeastlife.me. Charlotte Mason once said, "Life should be all living, not a mere tedious passing of time." So on this show, we seek to savor the feast of life. Girl, grab your favorite beverage and pull up a chair. You are welcome at this table. Hey everyone, I'm your host, Julie Ross, and I am here today with Amber Johnston, and I am so excited because we are going to be talking about her new book, and wow, what an accomplishment. I'm so proud of you. Can I just say that? Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of work and time and process that has been for you. Just in case anyone watching is not familiar with your work, can you just give us a little background of who you are, your kind of homeschool journey and story, and then what you've been working on recently?
Sure. So I'm Amber O'Neill Johnston. Some people know me as Heritage Mom, and I'm married to Scott. We have 4 kids. They are 12, 10, 8, and 6. We live outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and we've been homeschooling from the beginning using the principles of Charlotte Mason. And I spend a lot of time speaking and writing about, I would say, like diversifying the feast, if that's the easier way of talking about it. So expanding, taking all that we've been doing as a Charlotte Mason community, but as we've been learning more about her philosophy, but expanding some of the ideas to fit our 21st century American children and the lives that they're living today and the things and skills and experiences and that they need to have and people they need to meet. So that's my passion. And I've been blogging for years about these things and other things, usually related to educating the children. So books a lot, sure, but also art and poetry and other things. And people were always asking me questions, and I'm like, oh gosh, let me pull this blog post from 3 years ago for you or something like that. And here's an explanation, or wow, you're coming in the middle and you haven't really heard my whole shtick before. And so I thought, I really want to get my thoughts out there in a logical way where someone has right before them the opportunity to look at my whole philosophy from the beginning to the end and how it plays out in my family as an example and how it could play out in theirs. And so I wrote the book. It's called A Place to Belong, Celebrating Diversity and Kinship in the Home and Beyond. And that's what I've been working on because it was a lot more than I ever anticipated.
Yeah. I can only imagine. How long has it been that you've been working on it?
Okay, so I had 6 months to write it, and then I know
that is not much time at all.
It was not much time. It was at a very fast clip, and the only good thing I can say about that is it was really difficult, and so at least I only had 6 months of that type of lifestyle.
It's being pregnant, right? It's only 9 months.
It's let me do this. Yeah, it's so I ripped the Band-Aid off. And for that, I'm thankful now that I'm on the other side of it. And then months of editing and so on. And now just trying to get the word out. But yeah, actually 6 months of writing, and I got a chance to see what the life of an author is like. And I have so much respect for so many people now. I knew they were great, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're amazing. So, it's my whole family was on board with it because it kind of shook up. Yeah, it shook up the household.
I guess it's good that it was only like 6 months.
Yes.
A year or so that it was shaking up.
Yes, for sure.
Go back to normal here. So I love the title, by the way, A Place to Belong. I think that is so important. And one of the quotes you wrote about that, am I allowed to requote? You quote that?
Yeah, okay. Sure.
You wrote, "Every child longs for a place to belong, a place where cultural awareness, self-acceptance, celebration, and kinship are the norm. And this natural yearning for affiliation and attachment is best satisfied within the context of home and family life. Home is where lifelong attitudes are rooted and affirmed, where children learn the values that will inform how they move throughout the world. At times, those values are overtly taught, and at other times, they're subtly caught. And I love that, like play on words there, overtly taught, subtly caught. Because really what you're talking about and what Charlotte Mason was talking about is like the atmosphere of home and how important that is in shaping the person that they're going to become, more so than what mathematic book you choose, or if you read through all the books that you had put on the program for the year. What is going to make one of the most powerful impacts is this atmosphere of home. Can you unpack that a little bit of
Sure.
how you approach that in this kind of concept of belonging and how that home life really does affect that?
Yes, I think that what was beginning to happen, or probably has always been going on, but in recent years has really bubbled to the top, is this kind of divisive state that our country is living in, where people are feeling the need to like really take sides. And all of these articles and books were coming out, a lot of them from experts and academics and journal articles. And I was reading all of this, like, how do I help my children to thrive, to be able in equal parts to love who they are, while also loving their sisters and brothers across the world? And things were clicking with me here and there, but I'm like, but what am I supposed to do in my house though? They all seem so theoretical.
Yes.
Or if you were out in the business world, things you could do,
sure.
or if you're just only around other adults, these are the things you could do. And I was struggling with, but what does that mean for me as a mom in my house this afternoon? And so as I was thinking through that, I thought a lot of what I think that I need to be doing with my children in this moment are things I'm already doing, but I hadn't been thinking through them enough to say that this is an actual thing. And so I thought it's the home atmosphere. Like, I am an activist because I'm choosing to raise my children to be different. And I thought, not only am I doing this, but my friends are also doing this. And I looked across the board, and yes, my Black friends are doing this, but my brown friends are doing this, and my white friends were doing this. And I thought, okay, I think that there's something here that isn't being spoken of out loud enough. It's not getting the attention, but the power of a mother and a father, and what we're doing in our homes and how that's going to impact the world. And so I think that's often overlooked. Whatever. And so I thought,
leave it to us real experts, because we actually know what we're talking about your children. Right. Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, so what about the next generation too? We're talking so much about this and that, and what's happening right now, and all the nastiness on social media and all. And I'm just like, but there are a generation of parents who are reclaiming their relationship with their children and are placing value on home. And I'm like, you know what? We're doing something here, guys. And let's talk about it, and let's tell other people about it. And because I think we can be a little bit quiet, but we're powerful. And I wanted to like bring that power out.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. Charlotte Mason, talks a lot about the atmosphere of home. There's a quote that I thought related to what you're talking about in the book, from a Parents Review article called The Atmosphere of Home. But it said, there's nothing in the way of direct teaching that will ever have so wide and lasting effect as the atmosphere of home. And the thought concerning this is that there's nothing to learn and nothing to teach. It comes from ourselves. It is ourselves. It's what they're living and breathing in all the time. And then he says, we could deceive ourselves, but we can't deceive our children. And that they pick up on this atmosphere of home. It's much more than teaching and infinitely more than talk. So I thought of that quote when I was like reading some of your book too, that if our actions aren't lining up with our words in the choices of books and the choices of decisions that we're making in our families' lives aren't lining up with what we say we believe, our children aren't going to be deceived.
No, it's true. I think that children are truth bearers, and sometimes to our dismay, but they're honest and they can see through hypocrisy in ways that people who've been trained to look beyond it or to make excuses, children don't do that. And it's interesting because a lot of times parents will say, do as I say, not as I do. And I remember going to the seminar once and the woman said, but actually children are monkey see, monkey do. It's not so much about what you're paying lip service to. Yes, it's important to tell our children what we believe and to teach them those things. Sure. But it's what we do and what they see us doing and our character that they pick up on. And that's what they carry with them. And it's so critical during this period where they really are developing their identity. And I feel like that's a big portion of my backstory, where I was so focused on perfectly executing my child's lessons in this like beautiful, magnificent way. And as I think back, they really were beautiful. They just were incomplete. And I was focused more on swimming in what I felt was the beauty of her education. This is my oldest when she was younger, rather than swimming in the beauty of who she was. And I didn't teach her anything bad. I didn't need to undo things that I had shown her and taught her, things that she had learned with me, but I needed to expand upon them in order to bring out the fullness of who we are. And that really, when I saw, when that clicked for me and I started doing that, I realized that it's the same for everyone. For me, it was really about our culture and our background as African Americans. But for other people, it could be something else, the way their child learns or their family situation or where they live. And I thought, really, all of our children want to be seen and valued. All of our children want to hear that I see you and I like what I see. And I think that when my daughter started getting what she needed in that way, she really started growing closer to people who are very different than us. And I was like, okay, so it's like the opposite. It's like the more, the better she felt about herself, the more loving and kind she was to other people. And I said, okay, this is it right here. She needs a place to belong. All of our children need a place to belong. You and I, Julie, we need a place to belong. And when we feel rooted in where we belong, we can spread wide branches out to other people. And that's like a big overarching message of my book.
Yeah. And I love that. And I appreciated your vulnerability. I felt that really came across, and especially in the first couple of chapters, just sharing about your daughter's experience and feeling like, okay, you say that you value this, but the books that we're reading and the things that we're doing don't really value this, Mom. Wow. What?
I know. And she's still like that, right? I'm like, where did this kid come from? And so there's always borderline. I'm always giving her side eye. And I've told her before, I need to sit with what you just said before I respond.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah, because sometimes her little truth telling can prick something inside of me. And that was one of those times I was pricked. And I feel like the Lord used my daughter to show me his truth in a lot of ways of how he created her. And I wasn't necessarily seeing her as an individual that he created, but more as the product of this beautiful gift that I could lay out before her. And so I think in my case, we often talk about people who don't know anything about Charlotte Mason's philosophy. And then it's like, eureka, now when you're living in the fullness. But for me, my story was, you also can be living in the fullness without really understanding all of it. So I was doing all of the things that I saw from the outside, but I hadn't done the things that stir up your heart and the things that really create that lasting change in your home. So it just took me a minute, but I got on board and I saw that it's so much more than just what I can even see in a blog post or hear someone talking about. It's so bigger than that. It's much more expansive.
And I think people kind of be locked into, okay, here's the box of the things that we have to do. And feel pressure to stay there without realizing that we're growing alongside our children, that this is a process. We are all learning and growing. So I haven't figured this all out yet.
Yes, right.
The more I read, the more I'm exposed to the different life circumstances that I'm not the same person I was when I started homeschooling 17 years ago. But I'm growing and I'm evolving too. And that's the kind of space that I want to create for you as well. And I think your book kind of touches on that we're in this process together and that we're going to have these difficult conversations and go through these difficult experiences together, which I thought was really key, because I think sometimes, I think it was more so when homeschooling started, or when I first started homeschooling, of this, we're leaving society, like we're going to shelter our children and just instill everything that we believe in them, and we're not going to expose them to anything that's different. and
Sure.
and then this is going to protect them and keep them safe and have them grow up to be people that are going to change the world. I don't really understand. Now looking back, I'm like, how'd that thinking go? But
Yeah.
I think there's still part of that's still
Yeah.
there in that undercurrent.
Yes.
And rather than, okay, no, I'm going to tell my children, these are the things I believe, these are the things I value, these are the things that are important to our family. But I
Right.
also want you to think for yourself. So I'm going to
Yes.
expose you to these ideas, and I'm willing to create a space where we can have hard conversations. And you talked about that in your book. So can you touch more a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, I think that there is this feeling of like separateness, like we're needing, I think a lot of it comes from fear, because we may see people that we either don't understand, or we see something about their culture or their community that we don't necessarily value, and we're fearful that if our children learn about these people's ways or about what someone does here, that they may want to do those things too, I think is where part of that fear comes from. But the thing is, that's not typically whatever happens. And so what I'm trying to propose is that we can get to know each other and connect on the level of like humanity, and say, I respect you. Like your story is important to me. I want to know and to grow with you as another citizen of this world. But at the same time, I don't have to agree with you about everything.
Right.
And I think that's where we run into a lot of things. It's, I disagree with this person on this thing, so therefore I reject them. It's like when I'm looking at reviews on book sites like Amazon and other sites, and I'll like a lot of times go to the 1-star reviews just to try to figure out what's really going on. And it'll be like a 450-page book, and they're like, on page 27, this author said something that I disagree with, 1 star.
Yes.
And I'm like,
so the whole book out, there was nothing beneficial at all. Right.
Yes. It's just, wow. So if we're not perfectly aligned on everything, then I can't get any value from this, and I have nothing to take and nothing to give. And I just want my children to be different. And I want to be different. And I think that a part of it is born on the fact that a lot of times I'm on the outside. Like I'm the person, my family, we're the people that the other people don't want to be around and don't want to include. And I've experienced, oh my gosh, that's like, that level of pain is so deep that I think, okay, I never want to be the person that does that to someone else. Yeah. And man, I don't want my children to ever, I don't care who they are, never make someone feel the way you've been made to feel. And so I think that's where, like, at the root of it is there. And I'm thinking, even if you don't agree with me or you're unfamiliar with me or whatever, that feeling of isolation or wanting to be away from me or feeling like I'm not someone that you want to do life with, I'm like, we can't do that to other people. So yeah. I feel like a lot of times when things like that happen in your life, you either become like that person and you're like, they hurt me, so I'm going to also hurt other people. Or you think, now I know how that feels, so I'm going to do everything in my power to not do that. Right. And I think that's where it comes from for me. So I feel like I've challenged myself. I don't care how different I am or how someone's views differ from me. I still can find something to connect with that person about. Yes. Right. If it's a woman, I connect with you in your womanhood or your motherhood, or I can connect with you as an entrepreneur or as someone who grew up loving to be with their grandparents a lot. There are these experiences that can transcend politics and yes, even religion. Though I hold my faith deeply, I still can connect with the humanity in you. And so, yeah, I think those are the things that were like swirling around. And I felt like I wanted to read more about things like that. And I couldn't find a book that spoke directly to that space. And that's it.
I don't know of any, and not one that teaches parents on how to do that. Like you're saying, I've read a lot of social things, but here's what you do in your house. Yes. I haven't seen that. And I like, on this point, one of the quotes that stuck out to me was, you said, I've witnessed parents who resist teaching their children about anyone with a different worldview because they're afraid that the undesirable aspects of a culture or people group will rub off on their kids. The thing is, I've never heard of that happening, and it feels far-fetched at best, especially if your children are regularly grounded in your family's values. Many parents are okay with introducing their kids to recipes and songs from other countries, but their fear of digging into what others believe and how they see the world is so palpable that it can almost be mistaken for scorn. I get that it can be scary to consider that our children may form their own thoughts about something once they know there are options. Some parents may not like that idea, but ultimately, our kids are not us.
Mhm.
Yes. That, yeah, so important of what you're just touching on here. And I think, again, like you said, like things have to be age appropriate, right? But are we enabling them to think critically and
Right.
form their own opinions, which is what Charlotte Mason was talking about. They have to have the ability to reason, right? And to go, okay, I value this, I don't value this, I agree with this, I don't agree with this. But again, like you're saying, like she taught, you value people. And
Yes.
the reason that we're reading about these things, or her programs were very limited. And I totally acknowledge that. The
Yeah.
book options she had to choose from were very limited. But
Sure.
when you read why she taught so many foreign languages, or why she wanted them to read these geography travel books, was because she did have a heart for the world and for bringing people together.
And I feel like that's what I pull from her. So when
Yeah.
people say, oh, Charlotte Mason is whitewashed and all, it breaks my heart a little bit because I feel like no one has scrubbed harder than I have to prove or disprove that, because I don't want that for my kids.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking over and I'm like, no, that's not it. In fact, I would ask someone to show me another educational philosophy that values
That's true.
people
Yeah.
and other people, not just her
Yeah.
own people, more than what she did. So what we can look at is like the books and all this, sure, of her time. That's
Right.
where she was in her time and place. But if we take those ideas and
Yes.
apply them to our time and place, they're incredible.
Yeah.
Even today, all of these years later, they're incredible. And that, I feel, is what I hang my hat on. Like, I can stand behind this educational philosophy and bring it into my home and let it seep through all that we're doing, because I actually believe that at the heart of the matter, she had a love and appreciation for others. And whether that her book list is not going to look like my 2022 American book list,
Right.
but what she gave us was freedom. That's what she was forward thinking enough that she didn't say, this is the set of books, do it or not.
Forward thinking. Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
She was like, she knew that things would change and shift and move. And she, through her writing, she talks about things like a mother's intuition. She talks about freedom. She refuses to nail down this like rock hard book list. I'm thinking like all of these things are actually working in the exact opposite of what some people are trying to make it seem like she represented. And I also think, yes, there are times where some of us have interpreted her words in our own way, and that might look not diverse at all. But even in those times, there's something to value there. And I think like now we are learning more and we're all growing, like you said. And I think things are changing. And I guess I just want to be part of that change. That's where I really see my role. I want to be the person that can tell other moms, like, it's okay for you to show up at your table with your kid. In fact, that's what this whole thing is about.
Yeah, I love that too. And focusing on yourself and digging into your self identity first, which honestly, like you mentioned, like family trauma and stuff, for some people, that's just downright scary.
Yeah. Yes. For sure.
Okay, I don't know if I want to go there. I don't know if I want to, how far I want to dig.
Yeah.
Let's leave those skeletons in the closet. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But you have to come to a grip with who you are as a person, because that's what's showing up every day for your children, right? And the example that you are setting, I believe I'm a beautiful person. I believe I'm a person worth respecting. I believe that my story is important. Here's why. Your kids pick up on that, whether you say that or not.
They do, or they pick up on the opposite.
Right? Exactly right. That you don't value yourself.
Yeah, what goes unsaid, or what we think, if we don't talk about this, then my kids won't know about it. But instead, they fill in the blanks themselves. And so instead of getting the story from you, they still got the story, but it's probably not the purest form of the story that they would have gotten if you guys had just talked about it. And I think that family storytelling, and in the book I talk about something that researchers call it your intergenerational self, which is the idea that you know that you are part of something bigger than just this moment or even just the family you live in your house with, but that there were people who came before you and they did cool things and fun things. They had hard times and they struggled. They persevered, and sometimes they faltered mightily, but like, here you are. And so I think that the researchers said that the researchers that studied this specifically that I talk about in the book, so that children who have that strong sense of intergenerational self feel the most positive about their family and their futures, about themselves. And so I really have clung to that as one of the aspects of having creating a place to belong, is rooting your children in who they are and the stories of their people. And yes, part of the story is cultural, but some of the examples I give, where your grandparents met. And do you know where your mom went to school? Why she named you what she named you? Your parents' first date, all of these types of things that speak to who you are and the people you come from. And I think that for some people, you mentioned where their past is so traumatic, or for other people, they just don't know. They don't have access to those stories. I suggest in the book to start today. Create what will be your children's history later today. So it's about the way you start talking about things and the value you place on things. Like maybe you start a family cookbook. I know on Tuesdays, this is our favorite meal. We always have Taco Tuesdays. Here's why. Here's a picture of us doing it. All of these different things that can seem mundane or not important. If you present them as being important to your children, they'll hold on to those. And those are the rungs of the ladder on which they'll build their story. So it doesn't have to go back generations and generations. It may be what you did last week.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That was really helpful.
I think that really helps, so that it levels the playing field and no one has to feel like they can't do this.
Yeah. And you talk in there too, I think one of the chapters was like about the proverb, like it takes a village to raise a child. And before, generations, they lived close by. You might all live on the family homestead, or you might all live in the same town. And so they were constantly interacting with grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, and you knew your family story. Like you would sit around the fire at night because there wasn't Netflix, and you would tell stories. Like, but we're all so far removed from each other in our modern times that we lose that part of our identity. So I think that's really important that you mentioned that children need that, and that does help root them in their identity. And the importance of, you're talking about mirrors, and we'll go deeper into that, but like they need that reflection of themselves. And so knowing part of who their story is actually very calming and helpful for children as they grow and they have those roots.
For sure.
Oh, and one of the other quotes that I thought of while you were talking was I love that Maya Angelou quote about when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
Did I say that correctly?
Yeah. So basically,
that's my paraphrase, and I'm not as eloquent. But
that's basically what she's saying. And I feel like it's so grace-filled, because it's like, either I wasn't doing all that I could have or should have, or sometimes you just mess up. Like sometimes we just mess up. But now you're like, okay, I messed up, but look at me now. Like I have a chance to go a different way or to choose a different route. And I just love that, articulating that we have permission to do this. We don't have to continue the same way that we were. And that's with our children and with ourselves, and in a lot of different ways. And I think it even plays into kind of our political or social life here today. Like you might have said something at one point. I know I was really dogmatic about this one thing. And now years later, I'm kind of a little embarrassed. And I'm thankful that I still have those same friends and nobody's trying to throw me under the bus publicly.
Yeah, I'm thinking, man, I'm really glad social media wasn't around when I was. Let me just say that.
Yes, that's it. And it's just, wow, like I did say those things. And honestly, I meant it when I said it, but I don't believe those things are true anymore.
Correct.
And now I have more information, I've matured, I've had more experiences, and I actually changed my mind. And now I actually think these things are more truthful. And I'm sure I'll have another iteration, like a snake that sheds its skin as it grows. But I think that's important, that we don't feel as I guess, as we start having those pricks in our hearts that we could do something different with our children, and that we don't just feel I already had it down this one way, so I gotta just stick with it, because you don't.
Today's episode is brought to you by A Gentle Feast. A Gentle Feast offers a complete living books curriculum, an award-winning early reading program, and more tools to equip you to apply Charlotte Mason's timeless philosophy into your modern homeschool. Go to agentlefeast.com to check it out. Smooth and easy days are closer than you think.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that, because I think that can be hard to go, oh, I never even thought about this before. I never even thought about the importance of the books that we were reading and what they were portraying, or if my children are learning about people that are different than them. It never even occurred to me.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of people are like, ooh, and then there's that guilt, right? And but it's like, now you know different, and now you can do different. And Amber's book will help you.
I like the way you think, Julie.
Thank you very much. All right. So let's talk about, and we talked about this a little bit on my last podcast when we were talking about different books, but real briefly, explain the concept of, not briefly, take your time, mirrors and windows here. So let's start with mirrors. So things that are reflecting back to them who they are.
Okay, so that's the idea of mirrors, or literary mirrors. Those are books that your children can see themselves in. And they're going to, like, if it's a picture book, they might literally see themselves. So for my kids, a lot of those early books were the kids with those big hair. And they're like, Mama, look. And I'm like, yes, girl, she has big hair too. But it could be them seeing a family, an extended family with grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, as you mentioned, all around the table with a bunch of soul food in the middle of the table or whatever, they can say that's familiar. Or running around out back with the chickens, chasing chickens in the yard. It could be different for each child, but a lot of times what I'm talking about is a cultural noticing of children who seem the same, or people who have done things from within their own community. And I also focus in the book on stories of women that actually often go unheard, and that our boys need to hear that women have done some amazing things, and they need to hear our stories as well. So I think that's the idea behind mirrors, and the thought being that allows children to connect with a book in a different way. And there are certain children who most of their books are mirrors in a lot of different ways, and some children where none of them are. And I guess I want to lessen that gap, and so that all children are having an opportunity at times to see themselves in the things that they read. Not everything, though. And that brings us to the next type of book, which I call Windows.
Okay, we stop before you go to Windows.
Okay.
And a few things that you said.
Yeah.
So in terms of mirrors, one of the things I thought was really insightful was that the books that you're choosing that are reflecting back to them, that they're not all books about hardships and things that struggles, right? Can we just have a fun book where people that look like me are just sitting around playing basketball or eating soul food, like you're saying, right? Like, I don't need a story about some traumatic event in history. Let's just have a fun book where I see people like me doing the things that I do, right?
That's like very important to me.
Yeah.
So just the idea that the joy of a community will come through, because I think that even in the hardest and most difficult circumstances, people still find joy. You hear these stories where you're left thinking, my gosh, they grasped on to a corner of joy in the midst of terror and destruction. And I'm like, that's part of the human spirit that we're able to sustain during those times. And I want those stories to come to light too. And also because things are not perfect, but my children's day-to-day lives isn't dripping in tragedy and trauma. And so for them to have a mirror, their mirror would be a mom and a dad and loving grandparents and a little puppy. And there's a lake across the road and a creek back behind. And my boys like to go fishing and swinging on the hammock and going barefoot in the creek. Those things are important too. And for a lot of people, they're like, yeah, what's the big deal? The big deal is you hardly ever see books with Black people doing stuff like that. And that's where I was starting to scratch my head and be like, hold on, wait a minute. A mirror could be a book on MLK. Yes, that's important, but that's not what I'm talking. That's not the fullness of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring up that point because I thought that was really important. And thankfully, I think the publishing industry is starting to change. Like I'm starting to see more and more of that in the books that have come out in
Yes.
recent years, which I'm very grateful for.
Me too.
I'm sure you are too. Yeah. And in terms of talking about gender books, I have 4 girls. So that was always like, that was on my radar initially in terms of identity and stuff. Like I want them to read books about girls that are doing amazing things and girl scientists, and you can be whatever. That was always kind of on my radar. But I do have a son and he read Little Women. And
Yes.
you mentioned that in your book too, which made me laugh. But I think in his mind, it was never weird. It never
Yeah.
occurred to him that, but like in my curriculum at General Feast, like I put, you could either read Little Women or you could read Joe's Boys.
Yes.
Or one of my other favorite female heroines is Anne of Green Gables.
Yes.
And Anne of Green Gables, that's the one you mentioned in your book.
Yes.
And then, but I put a choice, like you could read Young Fu of the Upper Yangtze instead. And so after reading that, I was like, that's interesting, because with my own son, I didn't give him the choice. Here's Anne of Green Gables, and he loved it. He thought Anne was hilarious. But that might just be because he grows up in a house with older sisters.
Yeah.
So.
I think that the choice is fun because everybody is not there yet. And you do have people some people are going to be like, what are you doing? These like titles with these female protagonists time and time again. But I think that's where, again, I'm standing in that gap, looking to close that gap where I'm saying, hey, a lot of our boys are getting the message that they can't read girl books. They're getting those messages from their parents. I didn't realize that, but in my book, I share about a book club that I run and how strongly parents have come at me when I have picked a book that I'm expecting their boys to read that has a female protagonist. And because my son also reads those, I have 2 boys and they also read these books.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But when I saw in a series, as in we won't be there that month and things like that, they're like, I don't want my son reading books like that. Or my husband doesn't want my son reading books like that. And I'm like, wow. And then later when they're adults, we're like saying, that men need to be more understanding of women and that they need to respect them more.
Yes, a very good point. They're just going to pick that up through osmosis. I'm sure.
Because I'm like, if they're told even at that young age, don't worry, you don't have to read about their experiences. That's not important. You read about men and boys and what they experience, and that's fine. And so I'm just like, is it fine? Because I don't think so. And the things that, I think that, well, I could unpack that more, but I think again, it comes back to fear, right? There's something that they feel that they will trigger if they are allowing their kids to do that. And I don't think that's fair.
Yeah. And I just thought if you had a book club and you were reading Harry Potter, they wouldn't be like, the girl parents wouldn't be like, I'm sorry, we can't read that book because
that never happens.
Protagonist. That never happens. Right.
Yeah. So the whole year last year, this was happening while I was writing the book. And so whenever we had a boy star in the book, a boy main character, the girls and boys, we had full attendance. And whenever we had a girl main character, most of the boys didn't come.
Wow.
And the funny thing is the boys wanted to come. But the parents weren't allowing it. And that's why I'm talking to the parents in this book. And I'm like, hey, they're like, oh, my son doesn't like reading that. And sometimes I think that really could be true. If I gave my son a choice between 2 book covers and there's a boy riding a skateboard next to a mountain lion, and there's like a girl knitting on the couch. He's going to choose that. I understand that. But I also think that part of it is the attitude. I never said, I need you to read this book about girls. I know it's a girl book, but you can do it. We just grab the next book off the shelf and we go on, and women are people too. So I think that there's work that we could do there with our boys.
Yes. So one of the things you said in your book about mirrors that I appreciated, which is you said, while well-intentioned, the idea, and if you don't mind touching on this idea of a colorblind library, you said, in which race is not a consideration when selecting books, exposes children to the outdated theory that race-based differences don't matter. This ignores the reality of cultural differences and racism, leaving some children to feel unseen and unvalidated, while others are left without the vocabulary to examine and discuss their thoughts on race. And this really spoke to me. Silence does 2 things depending on the child. It breeds ignorance or feeds shame. The way to raise children who appreciate but are not overly focused on the race of the characters and the people they read is to have a colorful bookshelves full of color. On these shelves, diverse books are the norm. It is the exact opposite of a colorblind selection strategy. It is necessary because children are intelligent and absorb messages from the world around them. Yes, they do, right? Colorblind shelves are usually homogeneous, and children can interpret that lack of diversity as a lack of importance regarding the absent voices.
Yeah. So this is one of those areas where I've been attacked the most. And that is people who are saying, Amber, you should stop talking about all these diverse books, because what matters is the quality of the book and the character of the people that we're reading about. And I'm like, yes. But see, when we aren't ever focused on diversifying the shelves, because of our culture, our American culture, and things just continue to be the same. And those stories that have been made into classics, or even our contemporary books that are valued for reading in a superior education, they are mostly white. And when they do have people of color in them, they're usually undergoing some form of trauma. And so I'm saying we have to pay attention to it. I'm shining a light in it because eventually I won't have to. But right now I'm shining a light in it because we're repairing something. And when we get that repaired, we won't ever have to really do that. And so to me, success is a very colorful bookshelf where our children actually aren't focused on race and color, because it's so normal to them that all of these people would be on the shelves, all of these characters, that they won't even have to think about anymore. So it's almost like people are like, Amber, you're thinking about this too much. That's wrong. And I'm saying, no, I'm thinking about it a lot right now so that our kids won't have to think about it later. So I think ultimately, I want the same thing as my critics. It's just that I believe that they think that the do nothing strategy is better. And I'm like, no, ain't nobody got time for that. Like, I think we should do something, and ultimately we'll get there. So I think that's where I was coming from with that.
Yeah. There was another part I highlighted or tried to cut and paste that I thought was so important, was we were talking about like this do nothing, we're going to put our heads in the sand kind of approach too, is that isn't preparing children for the world that they're going to live in. We are living in a very diverse America. We are living in a time where people are having these hard conversations. Are children going to be prepared for that? Are they going to be clueless about how different people think and act?
Yeah, it's that exactly. And I think that's not fair. We focus so much on all these other aspects of parenting and childhood, but yet so many people are willing to like shuttle the children out the door with this severe ignorance of people and who they are and how they operate in their experiences and stories and how they experience the world, which can be very different than how your child experiences the world. I also think, when I've said this a couple times, and it's a little bit, I'm saying it because it's true, and I don't mean to hurt people's feelings, but a lot of the people who are telling me that we shouldn't focus on colorful shelves, I'm looking at them and I'm like, but your kids see themselves reflected on the shelves and all the book lists all the time. So you're telling me that my kids shouldn't have it. It's not important for my children or someone else's children to experience what your children experience. So you don't have to focus on it because you should, but you don't have to because there is no illness brewing in your home. So I think that it just brings us back to listening to the stories of others. And though you may not experience what I'm experiencing, but I'm telling you what it's like. And you should hear me as a mother and understand that something has to change.
Yeah. And I think, and that kind of ties into this windows that we'll go into, that it's important to hear other people's stories. I think you mentioned too, that books are great for that. It doesn't substitute from like the real life stories and the importance of that. We read Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the last podcast, but so I'll just tell you again, and maybe there's people who haven't heard this, but our town had her come speak, and then we did like a book talk thing afterward. And I assumed it was for children because it's a children's book. So I take my kids, and we're like they were like the only kids there. It was all adults, people that were well older than I am. And so in that book, it takes place in Greenville, South Carolina, where I used to live. And so there were all of these people that lived in Greenville in the 50s and 60s, mostly African-American women, who got up and shared their story.
Yeah.
And it went on for well over 2 hours. And we're all bawling and crying and just hearing these people's hearts and how hard it was. And I wanted to go swimming more than anything else, but I wasn't allowed to swim there, or this store wouldn't allow us in the front door. Now, when I walked past that store, it was all I could see. But I just thought, wow, like my children are hearing stories from real people who lived through this. Anything they're going to read in some book is never going to compare with an actual real person and seeing their heartbreak and their story.
I think that is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Like they read the book and there's value in that. So I'm like, yes, read Brown Girl Dreaming. But then going on and hearing these stories from people, and they're stories that are in a totally different time than where your kids are growing up now, but that connects them to the people telling the story. They can connect, even if I didn't experience that, I can connect to that feeling that you're saying that you felt, or that I know that you felt. And that little trigger inside, that's my humanity. Yes. That is connecting with yours and saying, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. And that I'm going to carry that story with me. And it helps me understand you and people who have similar experiences just a little bit more. And so I guess in my book, I'm like, hunger for that. Do whatever you can to get more of that, more opportunities to hear these stories. And I think that's why we talk about growth and learning never ends, because we should be listening to these stories for the rest of our lives. And at the same time, we're telling our story. Yes. Right. And I think that's it's like a dance. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of beauty there.
Yeah. So if we aren't able to have those stories in real life, then we need to include books for our children to read that kind of have this window. So can you explain that?
Yeah. So mirrors, you're looking and it's reflecting back. Windows, you're looking out into the world. And so books as windows, literary windows, right? Those are the books that give our children a chance to see how other people live, how other people experience life, and what they may think about situations and circumstances. And yes, you can see how they experienced historical circumstances, but also even today, what do they eat at their family celebrations? What are their family's thoughts on friendships and marriage and relationships? And how do they value education and what types and all of these different things? I think that our kids need that. These books provide a foundation that allows them to have some type of understanding. And their windows can be more than just the books, but in our form of education, it's also our music and our art and other things, our poetry. Those are all windows to the world. And just a quick example, I'll say, when you think about music, when I started doing hymn study with my children from the very beginning, and I would click on these links that would come with a lot of Charlotte Mason lessons and stuff. And I'd be like, I know that song, but I ain't never heard it sang like that before. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I don't know whether to cover my kids' ears or be like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And there would be a couple of times my husband would walk by and he's like, and I'm like, I don't know, that's the link. And finally I was like, okay, listen, kids, I got to explain something to you. I'm gonna have to break it down. People sing hymns in different ways. Yes. And that's not how we sing it. But we can appreciate that. But let me change the music here. This is how we sing this hymn. Right. So I think, and I made a joke about it, but my kids get it. Like they could hear and they understand. And I, ended up writing a whole hymn study based on this concept that our children need to hear these words. These are praise and worship songs from a variety of different people, all the same words. They all feel the same way, but their renditions of how they express that music changes. And so for a young white child to be able to hear a gospel version of that song, that's important, because if I invite you to come to church with me and you think that you're about to break out this little black hymn holder and be like, oh, I'm going to, it's not good, because we're like, and you're going to be like, what is happening here? But I feel like our kids are going to understand more, because they're going to be like, you know what? I heard those. My mama showed me the different ways that people can sing, or the same thing with Celtic. I was like, what's that? some of my friends, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I mean, they showed me things or we'd listen. And I was like, is that a bagpipe?
Yeah.
But I love it now. So that exposure
Mhm.
helps us in so many ways. So
Mhm.
anyway, I think there's a lot of beauty in it. I think it's fun to have fun with it the way
Yeah.
that we do. It's not all serious. Blame it's just, yo, girl, they do it different. But let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah, I
it's
love that you brought in the concept of stories, because that's huge. That's important. It's just we're wired for stories. God made us for story, and that is what connects us. It's what connects us to him, and it's what connects us to other people. But that there is diversity in everything too.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
not just the
and
books. Yeah.
artists, composers, hymn study, folk songs are huge in terms of
Oh,
cultural
yeah, that's so
identity.
easy in folk
Yeah.
songs. It's so easy. Yeah. And I think that's part of what my message has been in this community has been like, yes, the books, but I started seeing people like, oh yeah, I'm already doing that. They're doing the history books. And I'm like, that's good. But what about all of these other things? And again, my goal is that it be seamless for our children. So I don't even talk to my children about the things I talk to adults about in this community. My kids don't realize what the fullness of what I talk about and what I do,
Yeah.
because to them it's normal. So I don't want to pull out to them and say, where are we doing all this black and brown stuff? It just flows.
Yeah.
And so they'll be looking at Rembrandt one term, and then they'll turn around and look at Henry O. Tanner the next, and they don't see anything wrong or different. Not, of course, not wrong, but they don't even see it as being unique.
Yes.
And to me, that's the experiment. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. That this is just a natural part of what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is, I think that's really a neat way to put it. And I appreciate the resources that you have on heritagemom.com. So if people are interested in getting some of these picture studies, I believe you have that, and hymns, and just some book ideas as well. I think it's super important because it can be intimidating, because you look at all these lists and you're like, okay, these are the established books that are really good, and I know these are going to be great, and my kid's going to grow up and go to college if we read all this stuff.
Yes.
And then it's okay, what do I pick now? And you go in the library and some of the books you're like, whoa, we're not doing that. It can be a little intimidating of where to even start to find good books. So I appreciate that you are curating this kind of selection of, here's some really good books too. And again, like I said, like with the public, like there are really great ones that have come out that we didn't have before, and Charlie Mason didn't have, that are telling stories of people who stories weren't being told before.
Yeah.
But now
I think it's great. Yeah, they are. And I think it's getting better and better. And I do like to share, because I know that time-starved moms, that sometimes their hearts are to do one thing, but their schedules just don't allow it. Right. And so if I can say, hey, I already pre-read all this, like these right here are golden. I wanted to share that. And I get that from other moms. Like I'm giving, but I'm also receiving. Yeah. And I feel like that's part of what makes us a community.
Yeah. And I had a thought too, and tell me what you think, that just in terms of, okay, this is something I see as really important. This is the direction and something I want to kind of change or add on to, or you said expand in your home. Like I'm already doing really great things, but now I'm going to expand to this. That as us as moms, like our mother culture, we need to be seeping ourselves in this. So we need to be reading books that are mirrors, and we need to be reading books that are windows, and our kids need to see that.
Yes, absolutely. Because again, if we tell them one thing and they see us doing something else, it's a small example of that in a different way. I was always reading my Bible on my phone on the app, because I would just lay in the morning in the bed and I would turn it on and I'd read my little devotional and read my Bible. I was doing this for a really long time. And one day, one of my daughters, she was like, why do we have to read Bible every day and you never do? And I'm like, why would you say that? I read Bible every single day. And she was like, when? I never see you reading the Bible. Wow. And I'm thinking, okay, so she sees me in my phone. I was reading it every day. And I was like, I
love Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, I was like in a good role here. I had my time with Jesus every morning. And she told me she never saw me reading the Bible. I thought, wow, what if something happened to me that day and I perished? My child would go away thinking that her mother never read the word. And so I started switching to a hardcover and a hard copy, like my actual Bible. Yeah. And just for that very reason. And so I think of that the same thing with the books we're talking about, these mirrors and windows. If our children don't see us listening to it, or don't know that you're listening on Audible or reading these things and valuing them, they are just like, oh, so this is just me checking the box for school. But in real life, we don't really do stuff like that.
Correct.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I had a women's book club and we read The Hate You Give. And my kids were like, why are you reading a book about hate? I'm like, that's not really what the book's about. But it was great because they saw me reading it and I had a hard
yes.
copy of it. And I could like say, no, I want to read books that are about people I don't understand this girl's life and her experience at all. Like I can barely
Yes.
even picture it.
Right.
But I want to read about people that aren't like me and don't have the same life and experiences that I do. And yeah, I think it's super important that they see that being modeled, and it ties into one of the last chapters where you're talking about allies and accomplices. So can you break that down and then like your vision of what you'd like to see, how people can move forward together?
Sure. Before I do that, I'm going to say one thing about what you said. That's another point. Like sometimes when people will give me a book and they'll say, oh, I have this great idea book for it's a mirror for you and your kids or whatever. And they'll give me like a book like that. And I'm like, hey, girlfriend, that is mirror in a lot of ways, right? It's in so many ways, but I also want to make sure they understand the nuance that I don't know about her life either.
Yeah,
and so I'm learning too.
Yeah.
And so even within a race or ethnicity, there are huge experiences that people haven't had. And I think that that's where you get into the nuance and why we don't want to risk, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we don't want to fall into the trap of a single story. So if you're
you talked about that in the book too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
The idea that, or if all of their, books are tragedy and trauma, or if all of their modern books about Black families are urban, dealing with the trauma that comes or the situations of poverty and all of those are real and important. They should read those. But there are other aspects of the Black community too. So anyway, I thought that was like a really good example where a book can be a mirror and a window at the same time. So for me, that's book that you just named, that's a mirror in terms of Black culture, but it's a window in terms of socioeconomics and environment.
Yes. So. Yeah. And I even read books like that for me, white single moms like that live in poverty. I don't understand their situation. We're similar in our circumstances of life and our race, but I don't understand. What was the one? They turned it into a TV show. She was like a waitress and she had to clean houses all night.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. I don't ever think of the name of it, but
yeah, it was a mirror in a window. And it was very eye-opening for me as well.
I think that's good.
I don't really understand or relate to.
No, it's like the complexity of all these books. They're actually all mirrors and windows. So allies and accomplices. So my idea is that we're talking about most of the book I spend on our home. All of the things that we can do, just touch the tip of the iceberg here on our call. Like there are all of these things and projects and ideas and conversations and books and movies.
Yes, I love that. I meant to touch on that. I love those fun ideas you have in there for projects and things. Yeah, that was great.
I think, those are the things that really bring it home for us, literally home. And but towards the end of the book, I start talking about home as an incubator, right? It's a place where children are warmed and prepared for life outside of the home. And so outside of our four walls, what are we looking for from our children? And I think like we're looking for our children, yes, to stand up. I am looking for a certain form of activism. And I think people get scared when they hear that word at times, because if a parent doesn't feel that activism fire in them, they're like, oh no, I don't want them out there making waves. And I'm like, making waves. That's what we were looking for in their own way. All right. So I feel like my parenting style is a form of activism. I feel like our bookshelves are forms of activism. It's not always something that's loud. Right. And for some people, it will be. We're all different. Our children are all different, but we're looking for them to go out and make change, to create change and to bond with other people and to be willing to stand beside, in front of, and behind at different times others to support their causes, even if they don't see the immediate benefit to them or their own people. And so for me, the ultimate goal of the book is that we raise children who say that nothing's okay until it's okay for all of us. Yeah. And that to me is the real goal, right? That's the whole crescendo, is not just to have well-cultured children who experience a nice education in childhood and are good people, but that they're going forward with confidence and the ability to help make the world and the specific circumstances of other people better. I think that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And I think sometimes it can be hard to go, okay, how can I help people? This person, they're struggling with this and they believe in this cause, or I don't understand maybe their religion or what they're doing, but I know that they're being persecuted in our community. I want to help. And sometimes it'd be like, I don't know what to do.
Yes.
How do I help?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just asking.
Right. Yeah.
I don't
Asking
understand, I don't understand everything. I don't need to understand everything, but what will help you?
And I think also teaching our children, it's the asking. And then this is a really important thing, because I think it's for adults as well, that the help, like purifying your heart as you help, so that the attention that you may get is not important to you.
You mentioned that in the book, and
Yeah, I think it's so, because it's really good to help.
Look at me, I'm helping.
Yes. Yeah, we feel good. I mean, I get it. I've been there. I felt that too. Oh my gosh, I served at the soup kitchen today, or whatever. And that is good that you served, but I try to intentionally we do a lot of service in our family. It's an important aspect of who we are, but a lot of times there are things that give no glory. No one is coming to tell my kids they did a good job, because no one even knows what they did. And that can be difficult even for the kids, because they're like, I did all of this, and mama, they're not even going to know. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. They're not going to know who, but specifically, but they are going to know what, and they're going to know that someone cared. So when you're doing things and you do things anonymously, or you're doing things at home that you're dropping off so that someone else can use it and they're getting attention and glory for that work, even though you were working behind the scenes the whole time, that I really like having those opportunities for my kids, because I want them to understand it ain't about you. This is not about you. Okay. This is about a collective us. And so our part is not always going to be visible, and yet we're going to do it anyway, and we're going to do it well. And that's biblical too, but it plays out differently when they're used to getting the pats on the back.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, because as you read these stories, I think it builds empathy and understanding of other people. And our natural desire is to want to help.
Yes.
Because we actually have an understanding or a willingness to listen.
Yeah, it's true. And we have, the asking, the listening, the humility. We had, just really very briefly, there was a mom that I was mentoring. She's a single mom with young children and just really struggling. They were living in their car. And honestly, I was like, oh, I got this. A mom with young kids, I can help her so much. And I was like, come to my house. Everything's gonna be fine. We're gonna find you a place to live and a job and all of this stuff. The whole time my husband's giving me major side eye. And I'm like, I am so sure that this is going to be helpful. And I really wanted to help. But it just it was going on and things just weren't getting better. And now we're 6 years out from that situation, and they're not homeless, but their lives don't look the way that I would see as being a success. It wasn't what I pictured as being this major turnaround, but we're still in deep friendship and relationship. And after all this time, what I found, what she needs most from me is not a fixer, but a friend. And so someone to talk to, someone to trust, someone that sometimes will take you to Olive Garden. That's her favorite restaurant. And just when she's having a really bad day, and I can't fix it to make her life look like mine. Right. But I can be there for her. So that's an example where I was trying to solve what I thought was the problem. And I was really doing it because, I totally know how to take care of little kids and I can teach all this stuff. But in reality, the thing that she comes to me most for is hugs and conversation.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yes, I love some hugs and conversation too. I wish I could give you a hug.
I know, me too.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And I am really excited because I think this is a really important conversation for people to keep having. And thank you for giving us kind of direction and some tools to make some difference in our homes, because that is how things change, right? We change the next generation and they think differently and they do differently. Tell us about the pre-order specials. So the book isn't out yet. So this is almost April.
Yeah.
It comes out in the middle of May. but
So
people
it
can
comes out
pre-order it
May.
now, right?
Yes, it comes out May 17th, but I'm asking everyone to pre-order. I know for some of us that are older, we're like, what's up with this whole pre-ordering thing? But it's like a whole thing now. And it sends a lot of signals to the
I mean, I'll have
publishing
to stand
world.
in line at Barnes and Noble at midnight to get
Yes.
the next Harry Potter book.
I know. It's like people now, like they're so used to it. And I'm just like, the first time I heard someone say pre-order, I'm like, but why would I do that? So anyway, there are some incentives to pre-order because it is very helpful to the author and publisher as well. But there's a form on my book website, a place to belong book.com. And if you pre-order from wherever you'd like, any retailer, and fill out the form there, you will receive a choice between my newest heritage pack, which is called Joyful Generations. It's 55 pages of all kinds of multicultural goodness, books and videos and poetry and art and all of that, or Heritage Hymns too, which I just talked a little bit about. Yeah. And they'll get a code to go and choose any of my existing heritage packs off of my website. Wow, and so, amazing. Yeah, the value of what they get is the same cost or more than the book. So just paying people
so
back.
Generous of you.
Yeah, and saying thank you. And there are more goodies to come that I haven't announced. And everyone who already ordered will go back and they'll also receive everything else that's coming too.
Okay. So they can buy the book wherever, but they just go a place to belong book.com to get the bonuses for pre-ordering. Correct. And then if people want to find out more about you and some of the books and some of these packs that you offer, that's at heritagemom.com.
Yes, heritagemom.com. It's my website and I offer lots of goodies there. Most of it's free. So take a look and they can connect with me on Instagram at heritagemomblog.
Yeah, I love your Instagram. And oh my gosh, the picture of you on Christianity Today was stunning.
Thank
Absolutely.
You.
Yes.
It made my whole year so far. I love it.
I hope you blow it up and put it over the fireplace.
I know. That's all my like other Charlotte Mason nerds are like, yo, you got the pink volumes in the picture. I'm like, I know.
That's that was mine are all duct taped together, so nobody wants to take a picture of them. But
that's hilarious.
But yeah, it was stunning. So
okay.
I'm very happy for you. And so I encourage everyone to go check that out. And thank you again for taking the time to talk.
Hey there, Julie Ross here. I just wanted to say thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like this show, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a positive review in iTunes. This really does help people learn about the podcast. And each month I will pick a winner to receive a free gift. Don't forget to check out all the free resources we created for you at thefeastlife.me. Thank you.